Hello, Lion Bolt Kingdom. Writing a book is a big undertaking, but it's also super rewarding and a great way to get your stories out there into the world. In this two-part video, I'll take a look at the steps that go into writing a book and getting it in front of an audience. I'm Lion Bolt, self-published author of the YA urban fantasy and mystery series Detective King. This channel is just getting started, so if this content is helpful, let me know by liking, subscribing, and leaving comments. So before anything, you need a clear idea for your story. I say there are 3 places a story can start out of: plotline, character, and setting. Plotline is where you have an idea for a certain plot or an idea you want to convey, and you build a story around that. For example, you want to write a mystery, so you plot out the crime first and go from there. For character-based stories, you might come up with the main character or characters first, work toward developing them, and then shape the world and plot around them. Detective King was like that, where I came up with Arthur first and fleshed out the story after. Finally, you can start with a setting. Perhaps you have a vision for a fantasy world with a unique magic system. You might develop that, then create characters and a plotline to take place in your world. Each method has its strengths, so start with whatever naturally comes to you. From there, it depends what kind of writer you are. In writing communities, you'll hear the terms plotter and pantser. Plotters plot out every detail of the story before writing anything, while pantsers write by the seat of their pants and discover the story along the way. I view it as more of a spectrum, so figure out where on the spectrum you lie. I'm closer to a plotter, but my outlines aren't super extensive, and I usually prefer to discover characters as I write than get too detailed in their character bios. Sometimes if I get stuck in the middle of writing, I'll stop and write up a more detailed outline of the section I'm currently writing to overcome whatever is making me stuck, whatever uncertainties I have. And I'll just make it as detailed as I need to work through that. I do recommend, even for the most strident pantsers, to be able to answer some basic questions at a bare minimum before writing. What does your main character want? What motivates them? And what is standing in their way? What is the main conflict and how will it be overcome in the end? And what is the overall tone of the story? What are you trying to say with the story? Some version of these questions are a good place to start, and if you like plotting things out, you can then go on to outline the main plot points, write character bios, write out the rules of whatever world building or magic system you may need, depending on your genre, etc. I also recommend figuring out what point of view you like to write in early on. I wrote the first chapter of Detective King in third-person narration at first, but it felt stiff to me, and I discovered I much preferred writing in first-person from Arthur's perspective. First-person can be more difficult since you can't show anything the POV character doesn't see, and you have to make the narration sound like the character, which can be difficult if you have more than one narrator. But I found it helped me get into Arthur's head and show more of him than third-person would have allowed. Again, this is a personal preference, but I'm saying it because it would suck to have to write half the book in one style, then decide you like a different narration style better, and have to rewrite like 20 chapters. Maybe try writing a chapter in third-person limited, and another in first-person or third-person omniscient, and see what you like best. I might make a separate video on the differences in depth later. Once those things are figured out, you're ready to write the first draft. Ideally, the first draft is telling yourself the story without worrying about polishing it for the reader. Don't worry about grammar or spelling. Not everything has to make complete sense yet. You can leave placeholders. It's just getting the base story on paper. In reality, this can be hard. If you're a perfectionist like me, you can't help yourself from self-editing as you go. Imperfections drive me crazy, and I often end up revisiting them before I finish the first draft. There are authors who say that's okay, that you can write a chapter one day and then the next day go back and edit it before moving on. If you work with this method, your first draft is going to take you a lot longer to finish, but you'll have a lot less editing to do later, so maybe it ends up being around the same. The recurring theme of this video, if you haven't noticed already, is to figure out what works best for you. If anyone might benefit from the edit as you go method, I'd say it's pantsers. That way you can check the logic and flow of your free-flowing ideas as you go, and hopefully spare some intense edits later. In any case, it's up to you and your writing flow. Once the first draft is complete, you begin the dreaded editing process. There are several steps to a proper edit of a novel. First is the big picture developmental edit, where you aren't worrying about grammar or spelling or being witty or poetic. Instead, you're just looking at the big picture. Does the plot make sense? Does the flow feel natural? Does the pacing feel too fast or too slow? Is the book exciting or boring? Are my characters interesting? What are the overarching strengths and weaknesses? And are there parts that don't contribute to the plot and can be cut? And are there places that need an extra scene or two? I like sitting down and reading the whole book first while doing this edit, taking notes as I go, but not actually editing yet. Some people like printing the first draft out for this to get a break from the monotony of the screen, and I liked doing it for Detective King Book 1, though it's not an absolute necessity. Yes, it's a lot of paper, but you'll recycle it, don't worry. After identifying what needs work, implementing the changes, additions, cuts, etc., I might go through the book again and see if the problems have been resolved or if there are any issues I didn't catch the first time around. I know it's a lot, but you can't afford to skimp on editing. It's the difference between a bestseller and an embarrassment. Maybe that's an extreme, but you get the idea. Once you're satisfied, we move on to the line and copy edits. The line edit is all about style, word choice, descriptions, clarity, readability. If your first draft sounds rough, this is when the book starts to sound like a novel. The copy edit is about line level edits involving grammar and spelling, making sure the book feels like a professionally produced product. Just about everyone will tell you to hire professional editors to help you with these. You can get a pro for the developmental edit too, but copy and line edits are essential and very technical. However, I, like many of you, don't exactly have much of a budget, and professional editors can be very expensive. I'll let you in on a secret. I've yet to use a professional editor. A lot of author tubers would be screaming at me right now, but it's a reality. If you can't afford a professional editor, it doesn't mean you can't develop a professional product. You just have to work that much harder on your own to learn what needs to be done and to do it well. I've heard it said that the more edits the better, and that you should do a minimum of 10 rounds of edits on a book before you even think of releasing it. For those of us going it alone, I think it's a decent rule to follow. Even for those going through a professional, I do recommend using an editing software to help. Personally, I use ProWritingAid. It does cost money, but self-editing wouldn't be viable for me without it, and it is cheaper and more extensive than Grammarly's premium plan. I am not being supported or sponsored by PWA in any way. I'm not big enough for that yet. But I will leave an affiliate link in the description if you want to try it out. The final editing step is proofreading, which is a final read-through check for any uncaught mistakes, and I suggest holding off on it for now. Because first, I would recommend sending the book out to beta readers at this stage. Beta readers are people who read the book before it's released and give feedback from your last round of edits. I would allocate a good month or two in your release schedule to give them time to read. And while it can be hard at first to find beta readers, try to get as many as you can, people who will give you honest feedback. Maybe swap stories with another writer, find friends, so long as they will give you honest feedback and not just blind praise. I'd say at least 5 would be great. If you only have 1 or 2, it might not be enough for trends in their feedback to really define themselves and help you. So after beta readers, you'll do another edit, taking into account their feedback. If everything's all set, you'll format the book to look more like a novel and less like a Word doc. I use good old Microsoft Word for formatting. I'll probably make a video on this later. It can be a lot to figure out. I recommend doing the final proofread once you've formatted, so that you can check for formatting mistakes as you proofread. In the next video, I'll talk about the publishing process, the differences between publishing traditionally and self-publishing, which is where my expertise lies. I hope you found this information useful so far, so please stick around for the next video. I appreciate all likes, subscriptions, and comments. If you have any specific questions, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll do my best to answer them. I'll also leave information about Detective King in the description if you're interested. Thank you for watching. I'm Lion Bolt, and I'll see you in the next video.